Okay, here we go. We are a couple of minutes late this morning, so sorry for anyone who is waiting. Sorry that we're just a little bit late getting going here, but we are here and we are ready to go. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world watching this. So glad that you could join us today for ADSB. What is it and how has it changed the way that air traffic controllers control aircraft? That's what we're going to find out today. It's going to be a really interesting conversation. It's going to be really interesting for me too, because although I know a little bit about ADSB, I probably should know a little bit more. And so today, Darcy is going to teach us all about ADSB. So before I get into that, as always, I want to say this airtime webinar is brought to you by Elevate Aviation. You can go on our website, elevateaviation.ca, to learn more about what we're doing. And again, October 1st, we are starting our membership. And we can't wait. We hope you will become a member with us if you like. We are actually opening it up to 10 people only are going to be able to have a masterclass with us. We already have the CEO of WestJet, Ed Sims, as part of our masterclass. He's going to teach us about leadership. We have VP of Labor and Human Relations, or Labor Relations with Nav Canada. He's going to teach us about negotiating, and we have some other guests. So it's going to be an incredible masterclass spread out over 5 weeks, and only 10 people are going to get the opportunity to do that. So if you're interested, please let us know. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Darcy Arnold. Good morning, Darcy. How are you?
Good morning, Kendra. I'm doing fine.
Right on. So Darcy Arnold is an air traffic controller. He works with Nav Canada, and he is part of the Arctic High specialty. That may mean nothing to you right now, but if you listen, you're going to learn what that means. And it's pretty interesting. He works a small chunk of airspace. He works out of the Nav Canada building in Edmonton, Alberta. So Darcy, let's start with that. You're an air traffic controller, and you know, a lot of people know what air traffic control is, but a lot of people, as you know, they don't know what an air traffic controller is. So tell us a little bit about air traffic control and maybe specifically the airspace that you work.
Okay, well, the Arctic High specialty is the largest domestic specialty in the world. So we basically start at the North Pole and we come down 141 west between the Yukon and Alaska boundary and take up the northern half of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba to basically the bottom of Hudson Bay. A little bit of northern Ontario there. Then we cut right up the east coast of Hudson Bay, right by the Quebec boundary, cut over the bottom portion of Baffin Island, and between Baffin Island and Greenland, all the way up to 60 degrees west, riding it all the way up to the North Pole. So basically our traffic, what we deal with is we deal with the majority are long range flights, anything from the basically Chicago and west heading to Europe and back, and anything from Chicago and east heading to Asia and back.
Okay. If you're watching, there's going to be a test on this later. If you can repeat back what Darcy just said as far as the airspace that he works. So Darcy, that's a large chunk of airspace. How many air traffic controllers does it take to control that amount of airspace?
Well, we do it in Edmonton on any given shift roll. COVID is a little bit different, but in the summer we'd be normally running about 26 controllers a day. Right now with COVID, we are actually running with only 16 a day. But we, in the specialty itself, our normal staffing is about 43 air traffic controllers would work that particular type of airspace and have a qualification there.
So speaking of COVID, like how many aircraft would you say you're running now?
Right now, we're putting through the airspace about 420 daily. We were running, like normal winter traffic would be somewhere between 600 and 800 a day.
Wow.
So we're actually right around, right now, we're somewhere around 45% of where we normally would be at this time of year.
Are you seeing it increase? Is it steadily increasing since sort of the bottom?
Yeah, so the worst, like, or the slowest of the traffic was about the second week of April. We did rebound a little bit until the first week of May, and then it was pretty flat until about the third week of July. Since the third week of July to now, I've seen a real strengthening in our numbers. Still a lot lower than what it was, particularly in the last 2 weeks. I've seen probably about a 20% increase from where we were, but still only took us from about 38% to about 45% of where we would normally be.
Wow. That's how does it affect you guys? Like you kind of go in there and sit there and wait for the
Well,
aircraft to come?
no, well, the thing about air traffic control, like our specialty, we have 14 different sectors, and we can resectorize that airspace. Generally, we won't have more than 7 sectors open. So in the summer, we would hit 7 sectors. Right now, we're just working with 3 sectors open.
Okay. And so maybe just talk so people understand that you're one specialty of a number of specialties that are inside that building. So it's not just you and your airspace, right?
Right. So there's in the Edmonton ACC, there's, just off the top of my head, but I believe there's 8 specialties. There's the Arctic High specialty, and then majority of the airspace below us is controlled by the North Low specialty. We have 2 terminal specialties. We have Alberta High, which is basically the bottom half of the province of Alberta, and they work 29,000 feet and above. And then there's 2 low-level specialties underneath them.
Right. Okay. And the best specialty in the building, I think, is Edmonton Terminal.
Yeah, they're all right. Yeah.
I had to say that because I'm actually going back to air traffic control on the 27th of this month, and I work in Edmonton Terminal, so that was just a little shot at Darcy.
Well, we do very different things, very different skill set, and
we actually do, yeah. Like so just for interest's sake, like Darcy and I, both air traffic controllers, cannot just stand up and go work each other's airspace, right?
no, not at all. And your type of control is more reactionary, and you're dealing with the right here, right now, versus my air traffic control. Even when we do have a radar problem, we know about it, and we use conflict detection tools and all sorts of decision aids. And so we know about a radar conflict more than 20 minutes prior to the conflict occurring, and a non-radar conflict, like say for 2 aircraft going over the North Pole, we know about that conflict 3 hours prior to it occurring.
Wow. Yeah. And if in terminal, we talked to an airplane for about 3 minutes, maybe. So totally
Yeah,
different. So
we could talk to an airplane for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
okay, so while we're talking about the difference in specialties here, let's talk about ADSB. So ADSB, we're going to get into that now. Tell us about it, but just in particular with our specialties, like, so we don't use ADSB, and Darcy and I were talking yesterday, actually. And so Darcy, maybe just explain what ADSB brings. Is that where you want to start, or is that maybe that's a little too far down the road about, like, we were talking about ADSB and terminal?
Yeah, well, what we can kind of do is we can really briefly talk about what radar was. Here, I can share the screen here. And I'm disabled here. You're going to have to enable my screen sharing.
Oh, I have given you the power.
Okay, there we go. All right. So right here, what we got, I just have a slide here. This is a typical radar dome that exists anywhere where we have primary and secondary radar within Nav Canada in Canada, and it's pretty much the same thing down in the States and with the FAA. So as you can see, that's a big piece of equipment, that radar dome. And what it gave air traffic control primary was just the radar underneath that dome. It's spinning around, and in southern airspace, it's spinning around 12 times per minute. So every 5 seconds, there'd be an update on a target. So primary, all it is a radar pulse goes out, hits a target, comes back. The radar site measures time, distance, and it knows basically azimuth, like the angle away from the radar that the target was at, and it knows based on time and distance how far that target was. It does the same thing with secondary. The only difference is the secondary uses equipment on an aircraft called a transponder, which identifies that specific target to that radar so that we can create a specific track, and we can identify specifically, like say with an aircraft identifier, and so ATC knows exactly who that is. So that's kind of where we started, and it's very rude and crude. It's like analog, like our old cell phones that didn't work all that well. With ADS-B, what it allows us to do is go more to a digitized type information format. So with an ADS-B signal, what we get from the aircraft is we get basically a bunch of ones and zeros, computer code that is decoded when it gets to air traffic control. And what it does, here I'll just bring it up, what it does is it tells ATC an exact latitude and longitude of that position, but there's a whole bunch more information that's provided to us as well. We get winds aloft, we can get the aircraft's ground speed. We can actually also get information like what the pilot has input for a speed and what the pilot has input for an altitude. So there's a whole bunch of safety benefits as well. And I'm just going to scroll down here. So like our ground-based ASB, what we have is we have antennas. So as you can see, the infrastructure for ground-based ADS-B is a lot less than a big radar that's spinning around and needs constant maintenance. A lot of this ADS-B stuff is solid state. So it's a little box that's about 2 feet by 4 feet high, and we have 2 of them. And you just plug them in, and when they break, you swap them out and swap a new one in.
Darcy, do the technicians that work at Canada, do they pick the radar and this, like, or are they different people that are trained to do each one? Do you know?
Well, they do get training for both. So in Nav Canada, like we would have surveillance technicians. So people that go into that branch. So in our technical operations, we have people that are communication specialists and people that are radar specialists. Now, obviously, before they can work on a particular type of equipment, they would require training on it. So one of our radar techs or surveillance techs, they would be only allowed to work on the equipment that they've received training for.
Okay. Okay. So then from the ground-based, we're into a whole new area now, right?
Yeah, so what happened is Nav Canada partnered up with a company, Arion, who is partnered with Iridium. So Iridium started launching a whole bunch of satellites a couple years back. And here, I'm just bringing up here. So the first satellite was launched on the 14th of January in 2017. It was to replace the older, the pre-existing Iridium low Earth satellite constellation. So these were a bunch of new satellites that were going up to replace the old ones, but with a bunch more capabilities and with a payload that was put on it by Arion and Nav Canada. So just a little overview. So this is a non-moving map of the satellites, the low Earth satellites, and their coverages. So the little red dots, which you guys can probably barely see, but here I'll zoom in here. So the little red dots, those are the actual satellites themselves, and then their coverage is projected onto the Earth there. So with this low Earth satellites, we do get full global coverage. The trick is that they're actually moving quite fast. So I'm pulling up another slide. So you can see on this slide here, what we have is it takes about 100 minutes for a satellite to go around the Earth. So they converge at the poles, and actually what happens is as the satellites meet at the poles, they start turning themselves off because we don't need all of them on, and it's to save energy and fuel that's on them that they turn themselves off. So now, sorry.
Darcy, yesterday I was asking you, you know, like, look how close they look like they come on the top and the bottom. You said that they're actually spaced out a little bit, like in altitude as well, right?
Right, and they're also controlled. Like there is a unit in Virginia that's Ariane, and they can control these satellites. So they're constantly monitoring the orbit, and because there are low Earth, the Earth is constantly trying to pull them into the Earth's gravitational field and into the atmosphere. So they do have fuel on board that gives them about a 15-year life that they're constantly repositioning these satellites. They're also making sure that they don't run into each other and descend or increase their altitude, so when they're going by each other in close proximity.
So can you tell, like, can you really, like, this is huge, right? Like, I want people to understand, like, we couldn't see all the aircraft in the world before it was April, right? I think when it turned on.
Yeah.
Like, what's the
So
difference here that this is really making?
So, well, we can see, like, so in Arctic high specialty, we can see an aircraft right when it crosses 141 West coming from the FAA's airspace. We do have an agreement with Reykjavik, for instance, so we can see those aircraft up to 120 nautical miles, so almost 230 kilometers outside of Nav Canada airspace. So, whereas before we were relying on a computer-generated track, which didn't necessarily correspond to where that aircraft was because there could be errors in flight planning. Now we actually see the aircraft. The one thing that is important is generally air traffic control outside of a terminal environment, the separation standard is 5 nautical miles, which seems like a lot. However, these aircraft are moving each of them at about 7-8 nautical miles a minute. So when they're converging at over 15 nautical miles a minute. So 5 miles is 20 seconds. It isn't a whole lot. But the big limiter on whether or not you can run a 5-mile separation standard is communications. Up north, like when you're over the Arctic Ocean, there are no places to put a VHF radio where we can talk to aircrafts. So although we can see them, there is a safety benefit there. We're not allowed to reduce separation as much as people might think because we can't talk to them.
So they don't consider the communication that you have, you know, how you guys text to the airplanes now?
Yeah.
That's not considered
No, right
communication
now,
for separation?
so that is called CPDLC, that's Controller Pilot Data Link. And no, it's not considered acceptable for surveillance type separation standard. It does allow us, so normally up there, if we don't have any communications at all, the separation between airplanes is 15 minutes. So 15 minutes corresponds to almost 120 nautical miles. So about 230 kilometers apart, which is huge. Now that we have CPDLC up there, now that we can text the aircraft, we can actually reduce that to if they are properly equipped, we can actually go down as low as 14 nautical miles. And but it requires both aircraft to have the equipment. If only one does, then we're stuck at basically 120 nautical miles, or if we're running with assigned speeds, we can reduce that to about 70, 80 nautical
And
miles.
it's becoming mandatory that aircraft are going to have this equipment?
Well, no, the problem is it's very, even if the aircraft have the equipment, there's 2 satellite providers that provide data link capabilities. So there's Inmarsat, which is geosynchronous satellites. The issue is a geosynchronous satellite is over the equator, and it's placed really far out from Earth. But the Earth being round, it can't see, these satellites can't see very well by the poles. So there's actually holes in their coverage there. Versus Iridium, which is a low Earth constellation, has full coverage. So anyone that has Iridium, well, yeah, we could talk to them right up by the North Pole. For the aircraft that are flying through that are Inmarsat, well, when the further north we get, then there are limitations, and we can't reduce the separation standards for them.
Okay, Caleb, good morning, Caleb. Caleb has a question. He says, good morning. Thank you for this program today. I was curious about the coordination between the ground and satellite. So, Darcy, do they communicate at all, the ground-based ADSB and the satellite ADSB?
No, so the way our system works, I don't have a slide on it, but we have a system, it's called Fusion. So what Fusion does is it takes all the surveillance types feeds. So in Edmonton, FIR, I'd be spitballing here, but I think we have 24 or 28 different radars that are fed into Fusion. We have, I think, 9 different ADSB, ground-based ADSB sites that are fed into Fusion. We have something called MLAT, around Fort St. John, which uses a normal transponder. It gets fed into Fusion, and then we have a satellite ADSB. That track information gets fed into Fusion. What Fusion does is exactly what its name implies. It takes all that track data and with a bunch of software provides air traffic control a cleaned up image of all these data sources for that one target. So that one target might be created using 4, 5, 6 different sources. But the air traffic controller only sees on their display one target, and it's updated every 5 seconds, but it's done at a computer in our building in Edmonton, but just off the operations floor.
So then, you know, there's different separation standards like you were talking about, like with radar or the ADSB. So how do you know which one you're using and which separation standard you can use?
Well, so there's a couple things. We do let air traffic control know. So I'm just going to bring up here something here and here. So what happens is we have symbols on our display. So this is right out of our user manual, and I'm not going to go through and explain what all these are, but you can see there's a whole bunch, and I'm just going to scroll down. These symbols identify to air traffic control something very specific about that aircraft. So for instance, if an aircraft is a box like this, then that means the aircraft is an ADSB target. So all boxes are ADSB targets, and in the context, if we were running some of our reduced separation up north, we would know potentially that that aircraft has the equipment for us to reduce for a procedural separation standard. But because there are so many other equipment requirements, like do they have the right communications, what we've done is we've actually programmed our automation so that it interrogates the flight plan on the aircraft, and it looks at all the equipment that user says they have, and it chews through a whole bunch of separation algorithms, and it identifies whether or not airplanes are separated or not. So what has really changed in the last 20 years is controllers used to have to do all that investigation themselves and make a determination. And now the automation, all it does is if airplanes are separated, it doesn't even let you know that they're close. It just says they're separated and they're good. What it does is it identifies problems for the air traffic controller. And then the air traffic controller then drills into it a little bit more and goes, okay, it says there's a problem here. Is there some other separation standard based on the type of equipment that they're using that I can reduce from what the basic system is programmed to know? So it does get quite complex, but the complexity is actually is being handled primarily by the automation now.
That's not all that's changed in the last 20 years. We've gotten older. I
Yes, we
started
have.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone sent a question, and this is a question I have for you as well. Here we go. Did Nav Canada unlock, like going back to the satellites here, did Nav Canada unlock this ability to see the aircraft worldwide? If so, do they get paid by other countries to use this technology? And if not, are there still some countries that do not have the ability to see these aircraft around the world?
Yeah, so the way it works is Aireon has the ability to provide this information to anyone that wishes to pay for it. So like an air navigation service would enter into a user agreement with Aireon and pay Aireon a fee. And Nav Canada, being a part owner of Aireon, I guess would be an indirect beneficiary of that relationship. But it would be Aireon, the company itself, that would handle that relationship with some other air navigation service provider. So yes, it is available. No, it's not being used everywhere in the world. It's only being used some places like over the ocean right now with Gander, but again, that's part of Nav Canada. UK NATS is using it. We do have some other partners. I don't know that they're using it yet, but Isavia in Reykjavik, and there's the Italians are involved, and I believe also the Danes. So we do have different partners. I'm uncertain as to how far along they are in their implementations, or if they're just observing what's going on primarily with Nav Canada right now. But it is available, but it's not clear to me that it's being used everywhere. Where it would be used is in situations like that Lion Air crash,
Right.
with the 737 MAX and the Ethiopian Airlines, and that sort of data can be provided in investigations. They do have it, and they have provided that sort of information to organizations doing investigations.
Did you hear of, I think it was in somewhere around Edmonton maybe, where there was an aircraft that was lost, and they actually used this to track that airplane down and find them?
Yep. So there was an aircraft, I believe it went, I can't recall where exactly it went down. Now this is about 7-8 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they were able to locate where that aircraft was by pulling the raw data. Now that data is not provided to air traffic control in Edmonton, but it is able to be provided for search and rescue and to those agencies.
So why would there be people in the world, and I know particularly the FAA does not want this, I don't think. Like, why would countries not want to use this?
Well, there's different philosophies. Sometimes, like this, you know, at the expense of getting political about it, right? Is there's a cost, and a lot of times there's a cost to being first, because the technology is new, and there's a lot being learned, and sometimes say the density of traffic and what you're paying for, some people may perceive that there's not a net benefit to them. So other organizations may look at something like ADS-C and the use of a situation display, where ADS-C, what it does is it takes periodic reports on an aircraft, and it presents information on the display that looks like radar but isn't quite like radar. And some people think that that's enough. We don't need a 5-second update on a target. Some other people take a different philosophy to it. So I don't know. There's validity to both points. Nav Canada chose to go with let's show that we can do it, but there is some benefit in showing that you have the technical prowess to do it. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes demonstrating that something is possible, there's a lot of validity in that as well.
So what does this cost the airlines?
Well, specifically, I can't speak to that.
Is it basically though just putting the ADSB equipment in their airplanes? Do you know if that is that sort of their cost, or is there
No,
like another fee?
the equipment that we use in any modern jetliner is already there. What the cost is the cost is to the overall air navigation facility of Nav Canada and the services we provide. So I guess what that means is when aircraft are transmitting data to these satellites, and these satellites are transmitting data to each other and then down to the ground, and then from a ground station to Nav Canada, there's an infrastructure that's required to do that. Number one, we put a payload along, as part of Arion on satellites. So that costs money. Being a partner in the launches, that costs money. The transmission of data, the ongoing transmission of data, that costs money. And that is all, part of our fixed costs in Nav Canada. But we have to pass those costs along to people flying through the airspace. So that gets reflected in air navigation charges. And, but you get what you pay for. So if we're providing an increased service, and if we're over the ocean, we are able to get aircraft more optimum flight levels. And in Arctic High, we don't have tracks at all. It's all user preferred routes, and aircraft can pretty much get whatever altitude whenever they want. So from a service standpoint, and being able to fly fuel efficiently, the technology such as this does enable that. So yeah, your air navigation fee goes up, but you're not stuck 4,000 feet away from the altitude that you want to be for 2 hours.
So talk about the ocean for a sec, Darcy, because it has made would you say that was maybe the biggest impact so far that this has made, is the traffic over the ocean?
Well, I think that's the thinking, and certainly, but there's also challenges with implementation. Like what you had in the ocean prior to was all tracks were planned. And so those air traffic controllers were not radar controllers. So there's also a process of how do we get them to be more comfortable in running radar now that they can see all these aircraft. So yeah, there is a lot of benefit in aircraft getting their altitudes more immediately. However, there's also a process where we have to train people to do their job differently. And so we're not exactly, I don't think we're exactly where we intend to be, but we are moving in that direction. And so over the ocean, yeah, there's a benefit now, but there'll be a bigger benefit as the controllers become more accustomed to running radar type separation.
Okay. Trevor, good morning. Here's a question, Darcy, for you from Trevor. Do you think the analysis of the ADSB data from Iridium and Nav Canada on flights before and during the COVID-19 pandemic may help aviation recover economically? Can sharing data with the ANS providers and airlines be used to support their operations and minimize losses by better targeting flights to regions where they are able to realize some profit?
Wow. Well, and whenever those sort of things occur, we're really just partners, because airlines typically hold a lot of that data very, very tight to their chest. And in fact, when we do help them, they really do ask that we don't share that information. So it's not something that we necessarily go out and are proactively doing for them. However, if they ask for our assistance, then that is something that we can pull the data and assist them in doing that sort of analysis. So okay. I don't know if that totally answers the question, but we're not overly proactive. We focus more on the service delivery, because with the airlines, we don't know all their costs. So they have minimum cost tracks, they have minimum time tracks. So they're now analyzing all those things, even on a specific flight, like a dispatcher is, because they might pay more in air navigation fees to get an aircraft to a place for positioning earlier, because the cost of them missing that connection and how they have to accommodate all the passengers that say miss that connection is greater than if they pay the extra money to get the aircraft there earlier. So
Okay.
we don't know all their costs, and that's best left to them.
Okay. Darcy, do you think that this technology is one step closer to having less air traffic controllers?
Well, I mean, from my standpoint, you know, I know no one here really knows who I am, but within Nav Canada, that's kind of been what I've been involved with for the last 15 years is the automation of air traffic control. So just to put things in perspective, just the automation within the Arctic High specialty, we used to be 2 specialties staffed with 38 and 32 air traffic controllers. So the total staffing was about 70. And now we combine 2 air traffic control specialties, and we are controlling that airspace with 43. And at that point, before COVID, in that period of time, our traffic had increased by almost 100%. So we were with about 60% of the air traffic controllers controlling it with, we're controlling 100% more airplanes. So the efficiency through automation has gone up. With CPDLC, like this, so just an overview of how it works in Arctic High. When an airplane comes into our airspace, we automatically, not us, but the automation checks that aircraft's route. It has conflict detection. We have basically texting to and from air traffic control, but before we send a clearance, it is actually checked to make sure that the aircraft would not be put in conflict. It won't allow the air traffic controller to issue a clearance in a change of altitude or a change in route unless it is conflict free. And if it isn't conflict free, it forces the air traffic controller to review it. So now if a controller is reviewing it, it's not very far, I don't think, my own opinion, all things being equal, where the system can review it and then say send a clearance to an aircraft with, say, a restriction. So for instance, in Edmonton, we can send an aircraft a clearance to climb, but to reach an altitude by a position or a time. So right now the air traffic controller does it, but the system knows when the conflict starts and ends, so it's not that far away from the system doing what I'm doing, because I'm making my decisions based on what it's telling me. So using that, you know, thought process, why can't it just make the decision?
Scary. You don't have any pictures close on hand, do you, Darcy, of conflict prediction, what it looks like on your screen?
Yeah, I can pull it up. It'll be about 2, let me see here. Here, I got the user manual here. So I'll pull it up here.
This is your nightly reading, the user manual.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Here, actually, you know, here, I'll have to go into my pictures. I'm sure I took a picture of a conflict here somewhere.
Okay. While you're looking for that, I'll just say that like the difference, like I said, I've been there 21 years now, actually. And the difference, when I first started, you used to have to pick up the phone, do a little math calculation of when your aircraft was going to be in your airspace, when he was going to leave your airspace, pick up the phone, call the next sector and say, hey, Air Canada 123 is coming. He's going to be there at our boundary. He's going to be there, you know, at this time, this altitude, here's his name. The other controller would write down all that information, and on,
Right.
and it would go across the entire destination of the flight. So we have gone from that time where you literally have to do the math in your head, pick up the phone and call, to what Darcy's going to show you here, where it's just so automated now. And you know, probably we're getting automated even faster and faster than it's taken the 20 years of our past to get to where we are now, as what's typical.
Yeah, it's gone quite fast. And here, I just got, I'll pull up one thing here. So when we talk about our ability to text an aircraft, so this is basically what it looks like on our display. So it shows up on our display. We can see that an aircraft here had requested 36,000 feet, and then the air traffic controller responded with a climb to maintain 36,000 feet and told requested the aircraft to report level. And then here we can also, like if aircraft are deviating around weather, we can send them a message. So we can input the number of nautical miles, left, right, east, west of course. So under all these tabs are a bunch of options that are pre-formatted messages that air traffic control can send to the pilots. The way these messages are set up is when an aircraft uses those specific messages, we can only respond to them a certain way. And when we send them, if they load them into the aircraft flight management computer, they can only be responded to a certain way. So what it does is it eliminates communication errors. So even if someone doesn't speak English as their first language, if we issue a clearance and they accept it to climb to 36,000 feet, the aircraft, and what they do is they actually load it and accept it, the aircraft does it. So again, if you're looking at automation, like how far is it before an airplane requests an altitude change from us, and it's the airplane doing it, and then our system looks at it and goes, it's clean, sends it back to the aircraft, and the aircraft does it. I mean, we're not there yet, but you can see that at some point in time, something like that could happen. So this is called controller pilot data link. So that's why it's prefixed there with data link, and this was with a Polar Tiger 947 is the identifier there.
So just so everyone knows, terminal where I work, we don't use that. Like we talk to the airplanes all the time. So that's a big, you know, an example of a big difference of why one controller can't just go and sit into another controller's position. You have to be completely retrained on all of this. So how far in the future, Darcy, do you think?
Oh, geez,
I
honestly would be 100% speculating. That I couldn't tell you. Here, I'm just pulling up some screenshots. So for air traffic control, this was a little test scenario that I was doing when I was testing the new separation standards that were coming. So a little bit about my background. When we brought in the CATS system in 2010 into Edmonton, like when we finished the implementation in Edmonton, I did the certification of the conflict prediction algorithms for the Canadian air traffic control system. With the new separation standards that were going to be afforded to us with the satellites, I was tasked with doing the certification and the testing of those separation standards. So these aren't real identifiers. They're identifiers that I labeled so that I could keep track of scenarios. So like cross 04 is an ident that I used. So what we have is we have radar type targets. They are generated in a simulator, but we are running on a CAT system. So you can see in air traffic controller, what we have is we have a list. So each list has a conflict pair. So it takes two airplanes to be in conflict. So the controller gets that list. If they click on that list entry, I'll see if I have another screenshot here. What it does is it force displays the conflict to the air traffic controller. So that's not it. I'm just going to see if I have one. So yeah, there you can see it force displays their conflict to the air traffic controller on their display. And so what it does is it tells the air traffic controller when the conflict starts, when it ends, in this point in time, because there is a common point, exactly how many minutes, if zero, exist at that common point. So it can provide basically a traffic solution to air traffic control, so they know when they have to have separation implemented by, and when they have to have, say, in this case, vertical until they can put them back at the same altitude. So this is kind of how our display looks. So any of these targets, because they're all amber, they're all surveillance targets, so we are seeing them on a radar type source. But then you can see the list here, and the list shows us that we have 4 different conflicts. The colors mean something. The purple conflict is a new thing with the new separation standards. It basically says we're running mileage there. They're separated, but not by a lot. So you better keep an eye on it. What red means is that you better do something about those guys. They're not separated. Yellow means they're not going to be separated, so you should be thinking about doing something about them. You just can't let it run. And again, that purple means that they're separated, but by bare minimums.
So Darcy, who uses this? Like Terminal does not use this. Do all the other specialties use this, or is it just your specialty that uses this much of the technology?
Right now, it's just us. But with some of the things like with medium-term conflict detection, I know that there's a working group within Nav Canada. It's called the Commonality Project. So the problem is Arctic High, we kind of ran out ahead of almost everybody. And we're using a lot of this stuff and we're comfortable using it. We've been using it for, in some cases, 10 years. And then in the case of medium-term conflict detection, which is radar type, the system identifying radar conflicts, we've been using that for the last 2 years. But a lot of people that haven't used it, they aren't 100% sure how well it'll work. They have to work through some of those processes on their own. But we're fairly confident in Arctic High that it works very well. It's never missed a conflict, ever. And people make mistakes, and there's a potential to miss them sometimes.
Boy, oh boy, the future, well, if you're in air traffic control, or the future looks a little scary.
Well, it is and it isn't. Like the thing that, like in my career, and careers are long, the thing that in my career that was scary for me was you can catch 99.99% of it. But every once in a while, maybe once a year, there was something that you missed. And you caught it last second, and your heart does, and it's because you have your checks and balances, but your heart does a double pump. And you're like, well, with this system, it doesn't happen because the system doesn't miss anything. So you're never sitting there going, oh my gosh, I missed that. And I caught it last second. What if I didn't catch it last second? It just doesn't happen like that in my airspace anymore.
Wow.
So
crazy. It's just mind blowing, really. Like like how far technology has come inside air traffic control. And you, Darcy, have had a huge hand in that.
I appreciate it. I have been fortunate to be involved in everything from ADSE to the data link implementations to medium-term conflict detection, conflict prediction, and now the new separation standards that are part of the Arion project. So I've been fortunate in that regard. It's been a great career. Nav Canada has given me lots of opportunity, and I've had an awesome career.
Yeah, it is a very good company. So just back to the satellites, just to finish that subject off. So you say they have a 15-year life expectancy. So what's going to happen like that? I imagine that was a huge cost to get those satellites up there. Is Nav Canada and Iridium now looking at, within the next sort of 10 years, start preparing for this 15-year, you probably have to take them down before they get close to the end of their life expectancy, right? So is that going to be like another?
Yeah, I think certainly, this isn't, Iridium's been around for a while. So this isn't their, first kick at the can in doing this. So they're, they know what's involved in keeping this constellation going and what timelines they have to be planning to get the next series of launches up. So the specifics of that, I don't know. I'm sure as soon as they finished getting these ones up, they were thinking about what the next constellation may or may not look like. Engineers probably speccing, what those satellites, from lessons learned and what the next version of satellites are going to look like and what are their capabilities. And they're probably looking at who are the customers, who's going to be looking to put payloads on them because, a little bit of extra revenue. I'm sure that all that stuff, as soon as the last one went up in this constellation, I'm sure that that's what they were focusing on and thinking about.
Okay, Darcy, can I get you to stop sharing your screen for a sec, just so I can see you
Sure.
more? We just have a couple minutes left, so I just want to ask you a couple more questions. One being, so how long have you been an air traffic controller now?
I've been in air traffic control for 25 years as an air traffic controller. Prior to that, I went to the Royal Military College and was a pilot and took an engineering degree at RMC in Kingston. So I went to Moose Jaw, did flight training in 1995, 96. During that period of time, I got out of the military and came over to air traffic control.
And so, you know, as Elevate Aviation, we're always trying to encourage people to come into the aviation industry. And we, you know, of course, COVID, but we do believe that it will rebuild, of course. What do you think about this as a career, like encouraging other people to become air traffic controllers, even though we've been sitting here talking about the future and what that might look like for an air traffic controller, but what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the thing about the air traffic control, like, well, right now, COVID issues aside, is in today's environment, there'll be stability in employment. And to work for an employer where, you know, they do have a pension plan and, you know, you're not necessarily married to what is the gig economy, to know where your next paycheck and what your next paycheck is going to be. And, you know, you're outside of some of the cyclical upturns and downturns of, you know, in Alberta, for instance, even like something like oil and gas, right? You know, we're in hiring frenzies, and then, you know, we have to furlough people because of a commodity price. So there's a lot more uncertainty in terms of employment when you go into air traffic control and, you know, or air traffic services as well.
And are there other options, Darcy, like talking about, you know, the opportunities that you've had? So if you come in and you become an air traffic controller, there's choices, right? Like stay air traffic control forever, or maybe work on projects.
So yeah, like for me, I've primarily done projects and over the last 15 years. But there's people that move into training. There's people that decide that they want to get involved in management and they want to manage people and be involved that way. Not everyone that goes into Nav Canada is an air traffic controller. We have people in tech ops that like to work with equipment and communications and radars and surveillance and computers. And we have people that are data system coordinators, is that they kind of run our computer systems from an operational standpoint, but they were air traffic controllers, so they understand some of the specific needs that air traffic controllers have. And then again, there's flight service. People, some, you know, go into that branch, and then we have towers as well. So there's all sorts of different opportunities in employment in Nav Canada. So it's just not limited to the instrument flight rules like that you and I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Different types of people that go in, right? I think if people watch this, I don't know if from watching this they can get the correct impression of you and just how intelligent you are. And all the way your brain works. Darcy in our building is basically he's the guy, he's the tech guy that talks, and we all go, what? What's he saying? So I appreciate you speaking in English language here today, Darcy. He's really putting this on a level that hopefully we can all understand a little bit more about ADSB. But there's all types of air traffic controllers, right? You don't have to just be like a math whiz to be an air traffic controller, which scares some women off. A lot of women I've talked to about it say that.
Yeah, the math, a lot of the simple math that we did do is now handled by the automation. Like, we're not looking at things in terms of miles a minute anymore. Like in that depiction of that conflict, when I started, you were thinking about everything in terms of miles a minute. This aircraft is going 480 knots. So that aircraft is going 8 miles a minute, and some other aircraft's going 420. He's going 7 miles a minute. So we're gaining a mile a minute on another airplane, or we're pulling away a mile a minute. So that's the way we used to think because we didn't have automation. Now the automation says this is where the conflict starts and this is where it ends. I mean, you can calculate it and go, yeah, that machine's right, but we really don't do that anymore because it is just right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, well, Darcy, that brings us to the end. I can't thank you enough for coming on here and to explaining a little about the subject. The subject is fascinating. I think it's fascinating. So thank you so much, Darcy. I really appreciate that you came here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Kendra.
No problem. And to everyone that if you're watching now or watching later when it's not live, if you have any questions for Darcy, you can send them. You can send them to us at info@elevateaviation.ca, and we'll send them to Darcy. Darcy, I don't think you have a public Facebook or anything that people can contact you with. So we'll go through us.
Yeah, just go. It'd be probably best to go through you, because even though I do have a Facebook account, I'm almost never on it.
Okay, yeah. Okay, if you have questions for Darcy about ADSB or air traffic control, or if you just thought he's cool and you want to talk to him, contact us, info@elevateaviation.ca, and we will be happy to hook you up with Darcy to learn more about the fascinating world of air traffic control, specifically with ADSB, space-based ADSB, and all that's involved with that. Thank you all for watching. Again, if you're interested in our masterclass or our membership site, please contact us. You can contact us at the same email, info@elevateaviation.ca. And we really hope that you enjoyed this time with Darcy Arnold, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a good day. Okay, see you later, Darcy.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.